Go practice has become kind of a running gag on my channel. I end every video with that, but it's really only kind of a joke. And I want to talk about it because the folks at ThinkSpace Education asked me to write a blog post about whatever I wanted, and I chose this topic. So I figured I might as well record a YouTube video that goes with that blog post. The point I was trying to make with that blog post is to say that practice takes work. So don't mistake having watched an educational video with having acquired a skill. Taking classes, reading, or watching videos is not equal to doing the work. A good example would be, just because you watch a lot of cooking videos, watching a professional chef explain what they're doing doesn't mean that you now know how to be a cook. Or if you watch someone explain how the piano works and they demonstrate how to play the piano, doesn't mean that you now know how to play the piano, right? And it's the same for composition. Knowing how something is done in theory doesn't mean that you know how to do it in practice. In most cases, you need to acquire muscle memory, you need to train your ears, you need to refine your taste and gain experience, right? And I've said this before in a previous video, you have to treat composition the way instrumentalists treat their instrument, right? If they practice several hours a day to become professional, experts on their instrument, that's what we have to do with composition. Just like a violin player will practice violin and a pianist will practice piano, we have to practice things related to our instrument, and our instrument is composing. If you don't practice your craft, it slowly dies. No matter how excellent you are at something, knowledge and skills that remain unutilized or underutilized will slowly fade away. A really good example for me is my native language is German. I grew up in Germany, was born there. I lived there for the first 20 years of my life, and it's slowly fading away. I can still understand it and I can still speak it, but it now feels a lot more like a second language because I don't speak German on a daily basis. I don't hear it on a daily basis. I don't read it on a daily basis. And I haven't for 15 years now. So it takes a lot more effort to speak my mother tongue, which is odd, you might think, but yeah, it's even that skill that you acquired so young and used for 2-3 decades of your life, it can fade away if you don't use it. And if your native language skills can fade away, then any skills can fade away. And this is particularly important in a profession where we basically ask filmmakers or video game developers to put a lot of trust in us, to have a lot of faith, so the least we can do is earn it by practicing our craft. I mean, why would a filmmaker or a game developer trust us with their project? Or why would a composer that you want to work with put their faith in you, right? And risk their project and their reputation and their business if you haven't done the bare minimum, which is practice your craft? It's all about trust in this industry. Busy work. Let's talk about that. Because busy work is the friend of procrastination, but the enemy of actual productivity. We've all been there. We've done that. I have too. I'm guilty of it as well, which is doing all the tasks instead of doing the thing you should actually be doing. We all sat there at one point and have, say, built templates for weeks on end, or made business plans, or made endless to-do lists in all the productivity apps. We've all sat there and watched educational videos and took classes, reading books, setting up your workspace, upgrading your computer, downloading new sample libraries and new plugins. We come up with very elaborate things to do just to not do the thing, which is practice our craft. And all of these things that I just listed have their place, of course. Do all those things. Just don't mistake them for actually doing the work, because doing the work is sitting down and practicing composition. Often these things are used to seem productive and feel productive while not actually producing anything at all. At conservatory, we called this avoiding activities, which is basically productive activities that have to be done at some point, but not right now. There's a more pressing task, but you do the other thing, right? It's like when you have a deadline, but instead you decide to clean your entire apartment, right? That has to be done at some point, and it's productive and it's a good chore to do, but that was not the pressing thing to do. It's really a form of productive procrastination, if you will. It makes us feel good about ourselves because we have done something useful. It's just, we haven't done the thing that we should have done. We've avoided the more difficult thing that we ought to do. It's really a funny way of procrastination, right? Because you're not being lazy. So you do have that excuse. You didn't just, sit on the couch watching TikTok videos or, anything like that. But it's still a form of procrastination. Let's not lie to ourselves. And again, I am guilty of this too. All of us are. Consistency is key. This is something you will hear from any professional across fields, not just our field. In every area in life, being consistent will yield results. Consistency over long periods of time is where the success lies. Whether you want to become healthier, or maybe you want to nurture relationships, or you want to become more skilled at something, it is always consistently showing up and doing the work will get you there. And some days you'll achieve a lot, other days very little. That's okay. We're not the same every day. It's just consistency over time. You could kind of see it like the stock market, right? Some days the stock market is down, some days it's up. But as long as you're consistent over time, you're going to see the returns on your investment. It's the sum of your effort that matters in the end. And the same can be applied to our careers. It is rarely that one contact, that one client, or that one project that makes or breaks your career. We think that at the beginning, but the longer you do this, the more you understand that that's not actually what it's about. It's the sum of your labor, the sum of your work, your body of work, and the entirety of your network that will make or break your career. That is what defines it in the end. Now, of course, if we're talking about practicing, we also have to talk about what to practice and how to practice. So the first step is to figure out what area of your skill set is lacking the most and then focus on that, while also honing the skills you already have. You don't want those to fade away. So occasionally practice that, but focus on the stuff that you're bad at. And one thing I always recommend, I do the same when I practice, because I still practice. You always learn something new, right? We never stop learning in this career. When I practice, I like to isolate the different elements. So I don't practice too many things at the same time, because then it's really hard to pinpoint where the problem lies. So I always recommend, especially for students, if you haven't mastered a lot of things yet, to really isolate the different areas. I'll explain what I mean by that. For example, something you can practice is composition. So what I do and what we did at conservatory when practicing composition techniques is we would not orchestrate. We would not use a ton of instruments, because then it immediately becomes about orchestration and instrumentation and ranges of different instruments and the timbre and the volume balance and all the stuff that you don't want to think about that. This is about composition. This is about the essence of the piece. So you just sit down with piano for me, or maybe it's guitar for you, or whatever. Maybe you do choir or a small trio, or whatever it is that you're comfortable with. Take that and practice composition and voice leading, and really focus on, melody, counter melody, rhythm, all the things, right, that make the composition. Don't think about the orchestration yet. Just think about the essence of the piece. That's how I would practice composition and composition techniques. So you're not distracted by instrumentation or by mock-up and mixing and all this stuff that maybe you also haven't mastered yet. Because then it gets really overwhelming, right? When you practice orchestration and arranging, I would do that with existing pieces, right? Because otherwise you don't know, is the problem in the composition, or is the problem in the mock-up, or is the problem, right? I wouldn't do that. A really cool exercise we had at UCLA during our advanced orchestration class was that we would basically, the teacher would have a bowl of little snippets, little paper snippets, and we would all blindly pick one, and it would have a melody and chords on it. And then you would pick a sheet from the second bowl, and it would have a little arrangement on it from a known symphony or any kind of classical piece. And then the task would be take this melody that you picked and then orchestrate it and arrange it in the same way that, the arrangement is on the second piece. And it's kind of fun because you could, kind of draw the melody and chords from E.T., right? And then you would, in the second one, pick, a Brahms symphony, like a little passage. And so now you would arrange the E.T. melody and chords as if Brahms had done it in that symphony. That way you don't have to think about the composition itself or even the orchestration correctness, right? It's not so much trial and error because you're trying to copy a technique onto someone else's composition. It's kind of fun to do. And I always thought that exercise was really, really good because you're removing all the other obstacles. You're really only focused on how is this piece organized, how is this piece arranged, how is it orchestrated, and then how can I transfer that onto this melody and these chords. It's kind of a transfer of, you first have to analyze it and then transfer what you learned onto the melody and the chords that you were given. So it's immediately not just theoretical analysis, but also immediate application. When you practice mock-ups, maybe that is the thing that you struggle with the most. I would, again, take existing pieces. Take a classical piece or a film music piece or whatever, if you have the sheet music, and try to mock that up. Try to mock up the existing piece, because if you are unsure about your composition and your voice leading and you're unsure about your orchestration, you don't know if it's your mock-up that sounds bad or if the problem is maybe in the orchestration that isn't working, or maybe the problem is in the composition somewhere where, something isn't working. This way, again, you take all the other questions out of the equation. You no longer question, oh, is it this or that, right? If it's an existing piece and the mock-up doesn't sound good, it's definitely the mock-up. Prokofiev didn't make that mistake. That was you. You did not mock it up properly. And the good thing is you will also always have an existing recording of the thing, so you can load that into your DAW and then actually A/B what you've done versus what the recording does, and then see if, you can see the fluctuations in tempo, but also you would immediately notice if your balance is very different from the recording, right? And then you can fix it and kind of try to get an approximation of the sound. You could immediately hear, oh, I have way too much bass, or I have way too much of the melody and I can't hear this and that I can clearly hear in the recording. So that's a good way to practice and try and make an approximation of the piece, of the actual recording of the piece. This will also teach you what sample libraries work for what kind of style and what passages you would pick for, different samples, because not every sample library is good at doing everything. It would also force you to find workarounds, because you're gonna encounter a lot of articulations or a lot of timbral mixtures maybe, or runs and all kinds of stuff that you can't easily do in samples, and it will force you to figure out ways and to try out ways to work around the weaknesses of the different libraries to get a similar result as the recording. Some composers have also made their DAW sessions and MIDI files available online. That's also a really great way to practice, because you can literally just drag the MIDI into your own template, try to mock it up, and then again load the recording into your DAW and A/B what you've done versus what the final result was. Something I recommend with mixing, if that is what you're practicing, maybe that's your weakness, is, and again, I do this to this day, is book a half day or something with a score mixer that you like, bring them stems of a mock-up that you've done, and then ask them to mix it in front of you and explain what they're doing. Like really have them narrate everything they do, why they do it, right? And then write everything down, take home the mix that they've done, and then go into your own template and try to match it. So this is again about having a reference track, having something that you can A/B with, right? You can of course do that with other people's pieces as well, same deal. I found it easier to learn with my own pieces in this case, because obviously I have a specific writing style and a specific orchestration style, right? A specific production style, if you will. So having someone mix exactly what I'm doing is kind of teaching me more than, trying to achieve the sound of someone else. But so this is basically about reverse engineering the mix on your own end and see how close you can get to the professional mixer, and then save those settings in your template, of course. If you want to practice scoring to a brief, what you could do is ask any of your teachers or ask any professional to just give you a past real-life brief of theirs and maybe what they submitted, if they're comfortable sharing that. Or ideally also a gig that they actually got or something they were actually working on, so they can show you the approved thing and maybe even the revisions that it went through. And then before you listen to their thing, you try to do the brief yourself and then listen to what they've submitted and the thing that got approved. I used to do that in my first job. I shared a studio space with several really talented composers, and so they would do this with me. They would give me the brief that they had gotten, so I could basically stay after hours or stay during weekends and do the brief, and then they could show me what they had done, and I could kind of compare, and they could tell me what the notes were and everything, so I could kind of do practice briefs, if you will. It'll also make you realize how far away from professional level you are, which was kind of an eye-opener for me at the time. Or maybe you'll realize actually you got really close to the quality that was necessary to get the gig or to work on the gig, which would also be a good thing to know. And then another thing you want to practice is scoring to picture. Now, the issue with that is technically you would have to learn how to score long-form content, right? You'd have to learn to score feature-length stuff or a TV show, because it's a very different thing than, say, scoring an individual scene. But most people don't have access to a whole feature film to score or a whole TV show, so that's just not an option. But online there are a lot of scenes that you can download that don't have music in them that you can practice with. And then again, compare with what actually ended up in the film, unless it was a scene that generally didn't have music in it. This will teach you pacing, this will teach you timing, it will teach you how to make stylistic choices, when the music should come in, when the music should go out. It'll teach you at least a little bit of storytelling if the scene is long enough, but it'll also help you working under dialogue, under sound effects, right? That is usually a very big thing when scoring, at least with film and television. Another big part of this one is also that you analyze existing film scores in the context of the film or the TV show. Really sit down and watch it multiple times and see how the composer made choices and how the filmmakers made choices as well. The composer is not alone in making choices, of course. Like recognizing thematic and stylistic work. Why was this done? Figuring out how different composers tell a story musically over long periods of time. What specific choices were made to convey subtext or emotions, what pacing was chosen when, was there a particular moment in a conversation that was highlighted to, mark a change in the dialogue, in what scenes does the music allow itself to go big, when does it go small, when does it go quiet entirely. Analyze the choices that were made by the creatives in charge and try to figure out the why behind it all. And last but not least, we have to talk about soft skills. Don't forget to practice those as well. Media scoring is a team sport for the most part. I'm an introvert myself, so I love long periods of solitude, but it does kill your social skills over time. So don't neglect that. Practice them like any other skill, because the greatest compositions on the planet will do you no good if you can't hold, a basic conversation. Try to be self-aware. How do others perceive you upon first meeting you? What is the first impression that you leave behind? How do you present yourself? Do you ask enough questions? Do you regularly follow up with people? It's very hard sometimes to figure out how others perceive you, but one good way is to just film yourself in a, talking in a mock way, like pretend you're having a conversation. Film yourself and watch it back, and you'll be surprised sometimes how differently you come across than what you thought you were doing. At the end of the day, this job is based on collaboration with other people, so you're not gonna get around it. We all need to get comfortable with attending meetings and doing PR, attending events, and all the other social obligations that come with this. And the more you expose yourself to such things, the less daunting they will become over time. Because with practice comes experience, and with experience comes confidence, even when it comes to soft skills. Now at this point, I would also start talking about business skills. I have plenty of videos on my channel about that. I'm gonna skip that here because business skills really depend on your specific location and what kind of business you're running, so it's kind of not applicable to everyone listening to this across the globe. But I will leave you with this. Media composers are business owners. We have to run a business one way or another. And as such, it's our obligation to familiarize ourselves with local tax laws, different business entities, different tax structures depending on the business entity, legal requirements in your area, banking and accounting, marketing, and anything else that is related to the logistics of running a business that is selling a service, because that's essentially what we're doing. Anyway, I hope this was helpful, and go practice.